Welcome back to That Dad Guy. It's May the 10th, 2023, and today we're talking a little bit about World War II, or maybe we're talking about airplanes, or maybe we're talking about something completely different. You're just going to have to tune in to watch and see what I'm talking about. Let's talk about the Hawker Hurricane. Do you know what a Hawker Hurricane is? Well, it's a fighter jet that was predominantly used during World War II. The Hawker Hurricane was a British airplane. It was used between the 1930s and the 1940s, and it has a connection to Canada. What's that connection to Canada, you may say? Well, let's just go back to some details about the Hawker Hurricane. It was given responsibility for shooting down 60% of the air victories during the Battle of Britain. It shot down more than the Spitfire. The Spitfire, though, was more agile. It was quicker, but it wasn't as tough as a Hurricane. A Hurricane was a lot harder to shoot down. It was built a lot stronger, but then again, it wasn't as maneuverable. So Canada's connection to it was that it was given the protection to build some of these in what is now Thunder Bay. It was called Fort Williams at the time, and about 1,400 of these aircrafts were built between 1940 and 1943. And they really helped in the war effort along the way. But I'm not talking about the airplanes. I'm going to show you some pictures and this and that and the other thing. What I want to talk about is the chief aeronautical engineer that was responsible for the Hurricanes, for designing some of the specific things that would help it through time, and was given a special title. But in order to do that, we got to go back to 1905. 1905 is when Elsie MacGill was born in Vancouver, British Columbia. She was born to her father, James, who was a lawyer, part-time journalist, and an Anglican deacon. And her mother was Helen. She was a journalist, and she became British Columbia's first woman judge. She had one sister, and she had two stepbrothers. The stepbrothers went to public school, and Elsie was homeschooled in the first years anyways, but she had some pretty special teachers along the way while she was homeschooled. When she wanted drawing lessons, she went to Emily Carr, famous artist in Canada. For her swimming lessons, she went to Joe Fortis, and he was a lifeguard in English Bay. He deserves his own video, and he may get that in the future. Same with Emily Carr, she could get that too. Both very famous Canadians in their own rights for what she did. Now, she did go to King George Secondary School, which was affiliated with McGill University in British Columbia. And at the age of 16 in 1921, she was admitted into UBC into the Applied Science. But after one term, the Dean of Applied Science asked her to leave because she was a woman, and there were still some issues around that. Her mother, though, was a judge and activist for women's rights, and she really pushed Elsie to go into engineering. She thought engineering is where she should belong to, and she had an aptitude for fixing things. So in 1923, she entered the University of Toronto's engineering program, which turned a few heads. There weren't a lot of women in engineering, and that is an understatement to this day still, but at the time, she was the only one. In 1927, she graduated as the first Canadian woman with a degree in electrical engineering. But that didn't come without some challenges because during the summer, she was working in machine shops and repairing electrical motors. She was exposed to aeronautical engineering, which she found a fascination with. But just before she graduated, she contracted polio, and she was told she was going to spend the rest of her days in a wheelchair. She wasn't willing to accept that, and she did find her way to walk and maneuver using canes. So she got out of the chair and was able to use canes, and then, of course, graduated with her degree as being the first Canadian woman to ever have an electrical engineering degree. After graduation, she moved to Pontiac, Michigan to work with an aircraft company and part-time studies in aeronautical engineering at the University of Michigan. So she continued her studies. And then in 1929, she became the first woman in the world with a master's degree in aeronautical engineering. And that wasn't good enough for her right there. She didn't stop because she went on to MIT in Massachusetts in order to get her doctorate. She wrote articles and papers in order to help pay for this education, which she did throughout her career. In 1934, she worked at Fairchild Aircraft in Longueuil, Quebec, as an assistant aeronautical engineer. And in 1938, she became the first woman elected to a corporate membership of the Engineering Institute of Canada. You're going to see there's a whole line of firsts, being the first woman with an aeronautical engineering degree, the first Canadian with an woman with an electrical engineering degree. In 1942, she became the chairman, after being vice chairman, of the Engineering Institute of Canada, and she was the first woman to hold that position. And then in 1942, she went on to, she moved to Fort Williams, Ontario, which is now Thunder Bay. And she went to work at the Canadian Car and Foundry. And she became the chief aeronautical engineer of that company, the first woman ever to hold that position in the world. She designed and tested training aircraft. She now lived and worked there, and she also worked on the Hurricanes contract. So the Hurricanes were this fighter jet that I was telling you at the start of the video that were very active in the British Air Force, and the only two places they were being built were in Britain and here in Canada in Thunder Bay. They made 1,400 of them in Thunder Bay during between 1940. Original contract was for only 40 aircrafts, but they got out 1,400 of them by 1943. So they did a lot. And she became known as the Queen of the Hurricanes. She even had her own comic book. The True Comics issued in 1942 a comic book about her. So there's going to be a little picture up there showing that as Queen of the Hurricanes. She was also responsible for figuring out how hurricanes should be able to fly in the wintertime. So she introduced a de-icing controls and a system for fitting skis for landing in the snow. So very, very brilliant woman. In 1943, after the production of the Hurricane stopped, she met a gentleman there, which they kind of had an affair, and were fired after this company got a contract with the U.S. Air Force to build some aircrafts. There was controversy about it. Both of them were let go, but they ended up moving to Toronto and getting married. Didn't slow her down any. In 1946, she became the first woman to serve as the technical advisor for the International Civil Aviation Organization. In 1947, she became the UN chairman for the Stress and Analysis Committee, first woman to hold that position as a chair. In 1953, she broke her leg, and she used her recovery time to write a biography about her mother and her mother's life in the suffragette movement, and as the first female judge in British Columbia, which really sparked her interest too in the women's movement. So in the 1960s, she was active with the women's right movement, which was inspired by her mother and her grandmother. In 1967, she was named the Royal Commission on the Status of Women in Canada. She was also a member of the Ontario Status of Women Committee, and in 1971, she was given the Order of Canada. In 1980, though, she passed away after a brief illness, and she was in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time. She did have a few things that have been given to her as awards along the way. She was an avid writer for a whole bunch of different papers and things about aviation, about engineering, about women's rights. And she was given, in 1953, she was one of only 50 people and the only woman to have her picture in the exclusive Gay Art Gallery in Canadian Executives to honor her contribution and influence. In 1953, the Society of Women Engineers in the U.S. presented her with an Achievement Award. It was the first time a woman had been given that outside of the United States, or a person was given that outside of the United States, regardless of gender. She was given the Centennial Medal by the Canadian government in 1967. She was given the Order of Canada in 1971. The 99s awarded her with the Amelia Earhart Medal in 1975, and in 1979, the Ontario Association of Professional Engineers presented her with their gold medal. So lots of awards to accomplish an amazing life. Posthumously, though, She was inducted into Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame in 1983. In 1992, she was the founding inductee into the Canadian Science and Engineering Hall of Fame in Ottawa. She's been given a comic book we saw in 42. She's been subject of stamps. Got a stamp in 2019 with her on it. The Hurricane got a stamp back in 1980. We'll give you that stamp too up here. She's had a documentary about her. In 2016, she was proposed as one of the 5 finalists to go on the Canadian banknotes. So we're changing up who was on our Canadian banknotes, and she was one of the finalists. She didn't get it, but she was one of the finalists. In 2019, in the Lakehead District School Board, they built a school and they named it after her, and the mascot of that school were the Hurricanes. So if you go to École Elsie MacGill Public School, it was opened in 2020. Also in 2019, she was the honorary of the Canada Post stamp, which I just said, Canadians in Flight. So there you go. There's a whole bunch of things out there. She's even got a Heritage Minute, which is a little advertisement. Talks a little bit about Canadian history. That came out in 2020 as well. The final thing that came out to talk about was after she passed, the group of 99s, 99 organization said, neither gender nor disability prevented her from using her talents to serve her community and her country. So nothing really was going to stop her. She did have a leg up when she first started life. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Her parents were well-to-do, gave her a high education. She had lots of different people helping her out. But it wasn't for lack of determination, though, that really got her to where she wanted to go. She put in the effort, even though people were fighting back to not have her graduate. She made a way to get through all that, get through the boys club, and still get those degrees. She was the first on a lot of different things. And I went in to look in to see, how many women are in engineering now. And graduating right now, we're only graduating a class of about 20%, and that's up 6% in the last 10 years. And that's it. I mean, that's not very much to have a fifth of the engineers be women. So there might be some room there. I know I met a few future engineers when I was up at Concordia recently. Some of them studied some of these things too, like electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science and engineering. Lots of different things that are different topics you can go into. And apparently most of the classes are filled with guys, so it would be nice to see some more women. But if we go back, flip my notes over here. Elsie MacGill. She was the pioneer of first women in engineering, first women taking on huge roles during World War II, in coming up with new ideas how to battle the elements and produce these fighter jet streamlined production lines. She did all that well before her time, and hats off to you. And it's been great getting into some of this and learning all about it. So hopefully you guys watching at home, this might be some new information for you. Others, I know you're probably history heads and you probably knew all about this woman's achievements. But for those of you who didn't, I'm glad that I could share it, and I look forward to sharing some more of them as I come about and figure out which ones I want to research and get out. They take a little longer to put out videos on these because there is some research that's involved, and they got to put it together for you. But hopefully what I put together you enjoyed. So make sure you're subscribed, you like, you comment, and you stay tuned for what's new. Have a magical week. What, Polo? You say like, subscribe, share, and tell all your friends.
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy?
Bye.